give a big hand to Lewis Castle, who's going to talk about the future of digital entertainment distribution. Thank you.
Okay, so, want my slides up? Yeah, perfect. I think. There we go. Okay, so I always sort of start off with a brief overview of what I'm going to be talking about today, and this talk is focused on distribution. It's probably not exactly what you're thinking, though, in the sense that it's more about how entertainment gets distributed and how it's changed over time, and sort of what kind of an accelerated cycle we're on now. So first, I got a very kind introduction there. Thank you very much. But to give you a little bit of my background, I've done a few other things. Computer science and fine arts is actually where I started. Ended up doing finance just, of course, because the business grew and I was the guy that was running the numbers, and so operations and finance became the thing that I ended up learning how to do, but I didn't have a formal background in that. And then, of course, Westwood was acquired by multiple companies, actually, over time. First started with Virgin and then Electronic Arts, and there were some other players in between there. And ultimately worked for Electronic Arts for many years as a creative officer for the LA studios. So I did some things with the Battle for Middle-earth and on consoles. I'm very passionate about very serious games like that, but also worked with Steven Spielberg on Boom Blocks. And so my exit out of EA was sort of strangely precipitated because of that. Steven has some really wonderful insights, as I'm sure everybody would imagine. And when you spend any time with somebody like that, somebody with a great mind like that, you start to see where things are going versus where they are. And I love the quote. It's actually, I don't know if there's a lot of hockey fans here, but Wayne Gretzky was once asked, a great hockey player, they said, well, what is it about you that's so great? It probably applies to football or anything else. And he said, and I don't think he was being cheeky, I think he was being quite sincere, I go where the puck is going to be instead of going to where it is or where other people are looking. And so I think that that's really my career, my time now, and why I'm at Zynga, is because I think that there's a lot of things going the direction that Zynga is going, or basically where Zynga is now. And I originally signed up for this talk when I was running Instant Action for IAC, but I don't think that the topic has changed much. In fact, it's something I'm very passionate about. So hopefully I can give you some insights that I feel are important. So the picture on the screen there shows, in the very, very background there's some code that you see, some basic code. That's actually where I started in this industry. The first distribution that I had for my games was I would mail them in. I would print them out and then mail them into a magazine, and a magazine would publish them. And then the people on the other side, and this is craziness, right? There would be people on the other side, consumers would buy the magazines and type in the code. And in fact, a lot of people talk about typing, and you kind of, it truly is amazing that anybody would go through this trouble, right? Okay? I mean, the content was so compelling, even these little small games, that people would take the time, I mean, hours and hours and hours typing in numbers, because it was all actually basically data statements. It was really machine code by the end. But I know a lot of other people in the business, too, started there. And that's actually, I think, very important today, because the indie scene, as Ian was mentioning, and so many people have noticed, we're seeing that the older games are coming back, or at least the style of games have come back. But it's much, much faster. And that's a key point. So I actually did make games that were in magazines about once a month. I would usually send in 2 or 3 because so many of them got turned down. So hopefully I would hit one every now and then. And then eventually onto cassette tapes and then onto floppy disks. The larger floppies, the smaller floppies, and the micro floppies. And I remember when we first got the hard drive, the Apple hard drive for our Apple computer, and I was making games at the time, and it was a 5 megabyte hard drive. I'm like, oh my God, how could you ever fill that? Right, so it's just insane. But what happened is every time the distribution mechanism or medium changed, the games would change. And I think that was an interesting insight in the sense that it's an interesting event in the sense that if you want to know what's going to happen, a lot of times you can just look at what has happened in other industries and other places. And you can certainly see it repeat itself over and over and over again. And each time we got a new way, in fact, as an industry, each time we got a new way of distributing things, the first thing we would do is the same thing the entertainment industry would do. So let me show you that next slide here. So this is entertainment distribution, right? And you'll see the echo here very, very shortly. Of course, we started with storytellers, people standing around campfires telling stories, all word of mouth and such. And then we had theater. the Greek theaters up there. I don't know if it's very clear. It's a small picture. Of course, the Gutenberg Press brings out printing. Used it for Bibles, but it was very useful for lots of other things, communication. And what's interesting about each time that storytelling changed, every time that entertainment or games or reflections of their society changed, the first thing that happened was they copied the previous thing, right? But then you found the secret. You found the secret sauce, if we call it today, or some people say snap, that was great. But everybody changes, they might change the way they describe it, but at the end of the day, there was always something about each one of these mediums that changed not just what was happening, but what could happen. And that was really the more important thing in my mind was when film started, that great train robbery there with the guy shooting a gun right at the screen. When film started, the first movies were basically a camera filming a stage. And it was people like Hitchcock that said, you know, you can actually use multiple cameras. You can switch them, do montage, and all these other things, and we won't go into all that detail. What was really interesting, though, to me about entertainment is, again, this distribution mechanism. So what is it that's unique about distribution? And I know this is a business conference, but I challenge all of you to think about the space that we're in today and realize that the reason that games like a Zynga game or like anybody else's social media games look a lot like the games did in the past is not as much because the space is the same, but because we just haven't figured out what to do with it yet. And when we do, it's going to change, and it'll change everything. So this is important. It's important from a business point of view because I like to look at this little device as the canary in the coal mine for the music industry, right? Somebody should have been paying attention, okay? And they didn't. They saw this device and they said, well, it's rubbish sound, it doesn't work very well, and it can't hold very many songs, and they made all sorts of excuses for why this wasn't going to change their world, and it changed it. It changed it in very, very massively disruptive ways. And the reason it did that was multifold, but part of it for sure was the way that songs now got to consumers. And again, not wanting to speak to other people's industries, but it is really curious if you think about the music industry. They made a great deal of money really working hard on one particular song or one particular artist's expression. And then they would go out and create a package of this person's work. Usually the rest of it sounded very little like that. And people would say, oh, I can't understand why there's one good song on an album. Well, it was by design, right? The industry controlled the distribution. They controlled how it got to the consumers. So they didn't have to make every song great. They just had to have a couple of singles. And they could sell you the whole thing, because you pretty much had to buy it all. And so they thought, well, okay, just like CDs, this is just going to be a new way of selling music. But it didn't work out that way. And the reason I bring this one up is just like the entertainment, the evolution, is because these are our canaries. For our industry right now, these companies all represent canaries in the coal mine. And there's others as well. I'm just picking some of my favorites. It's not so much that, and people have misquoted me in saying that I thought consoles are dead. I don't believe that at all. I think the thing we think about as a platform or a console is going to morph. Those same chipset, those same technologies, those same abilities are just going to find themselves in other devices. Everything from televisions to pads, as you so correctly pointed out. I mean, you might be carrying your phone around and say, oh, let me just punch up whatever my media is, and it'll throw up onto a screen exactly what you want. And the reason I say people like World of Warcraft is because they've already made that transition. Blizzard, showed us what tens of millions of people would be willing to pay and how much trouble they would go through for their entertainment. It's not unlike going back and typing in that code off of a page. And I think really, if you look at each one of these, of course, OnLive, Gaikai, they're trying to bring these premium gaming right through the web browser into people's homes. I think that's exactly the space it comes. Facebook, Zynga already have done that, Playdom, other people. It seems funny to me, though, that we still, I'm not saying packaged goods is gone, but it is exactly that. It's polarizing. The big will get bigger and stronger for a while until that distribution changes. And it's going to change quite suddenly is what's really probably going to happen. And pretty soon, I believe that course is unsustainable. Bricks and mortar is just an inconvenient way for you to get your entertainment. So what's really funny to me is we've had a long time, because our industry keeps changing the technology, we keep moving the base, we've basically avoided, we've run in front of this speeding train behind us. We've managed to stay in front of it quite some time. And it hasn't quite happened yet where any expression that an artist might have in our space can be experienced on any device, anywhere, and we don't worry about how fast the processor is, how much memory it has. We still have these games that really push the outer limits of this stuff, but it is going to happen. Just like audio, couldn't fit on a device in your pocket, but it will, right? And just like you can't take movies over the internet because they're just too big, but they do, right? And these things are going to happen. And so I'm saying that these are our canaries because they're the ones that are showing us the hint of what's coming. And if you're going to be in this business, especially a long time like me, hopefully you can be where the puck is going, like Gretzky, and not where it was. And that's not to say that premium games are going away. Quite the opposite. I think premium games are, online games are becoming premium games. Premium games must go online. These things have to collide. So, what do I mean about all this? Well, first, the entertainment 1, 2, 3s today, and I'm making it a broad comment about entertainment because I do believe this applies to all entertainment. I don't think it's just games. I just happen to like to make games. That's what I do. But I believe all entertainment across all the spectrum, from audio to video to everything, are going to have these three really core components to them. The first is their distribution will be social. Okay, now that doesn't mean social media necessarily, but it means by recommendation, by a like, by a reference. The reason these things explode so fast is they are social. If you're building a company that's doing entertainment today in the digital space, and you're not paying attention to the social network that connects people and shares that information, you're not going to be around. It's not necessarily about browsing and a portal and control. See, this is what people think. I don't believe that's the case at all. I think it really is the social network. We live in a media inundation, and we were talking even last night about artists that use lots of different audio artists, musicians that use lots of samples. And they say, well, that's just that same song that was from 20 years ago, so it sounds very familiar. But if you're washing in media like the kids are today, like all of us are as consumers, some of the most creative things you can do is curate. It's editing, right? So social is the strongest form of curation in the sense that it tells you, I like this because my friends like it. That's not to say that somebody's going to go into a browser and type or find things. You don't stumble upon through a browser. You stumble upon using StumbleUpon, right? Or you stumble upon because a friend told you, but you don't stumble upon using a browser anymore. And in fact, I think search in a weird way is outdated, and it has to change. There's not going to be a portal. We don't get to control this. As an industry, as a media, nobody gets to control it. We're not going to because people will not find it acceptable anymore to have to be controlled. Now, what's interesting about that is the music industry there's a movement in the music industry right now, and I've sort of infamously said that they're completely crazy for trying it, even if they could get it on, which is to monitor all the bits moving across the various information systems to see if copyrighted material is being transferred and stop them. By God, we're going to go back and charge for these songs. It's a fool's errand. It really is, right? It's not because you can't do it. Technically, you can, but because you shouldn't do it. That's not the strength of the medium, right? The medium is about being social. It's about sharing and discovering and finding things. And I do believe it has to be free, right? So freemium, right? And I'm a convert here. I used to say, oh, God, you can't just give things away. You have to, right? Because people want to be able to have immediate access. They're not going to have to go through some sort of a gate. They want to be able to have a predictable experience no matter where they have it. And they're going to want enough of a sample of the material that they're having to decide whether or not they like it before they give you their time. And their time is the most precious thing. They will pay dearly eventually, but they'll only do it if they're enjoying the experience and they found what they want. And so to stay in front of that expectation, you have to keep rising the ante, as it were. And when I say they will pay for it, I do believe that, again, they're demonstrating it everywhere, that once they have something they like, people will pay for it. Not everybody, by the way. Some people will just consume for free. But the people that do like it will pay large sums of money to have their entertainment, and they'll happily do so. In fact, the most frustrating thing for me as a consumer for broadband entertainment in the home is there isn't a package I can buy that gives me everything. And I'm kind of crazy, and I've done well in life. I would pay for it, gladly, but they don't offer it. This is a foolish thing. They should offer it. If you have a game that has lots of access or material in it, and there are gates in it, of course there should be. Make sure that there's a way for people to buy through it. Right? Pay attention. They will. And they'll do it because they want to save time. They want to have access to something special. They want to express themselves. They believe that there's security involved in that, like an entitlement-based system. These are things that people will pay for. And they've shown it time again. And of course, performance, last one, is definitely important too. So My business partner, Brett, who founded Westwood with me, and this is why I say I was a convert, this was probably 10 years ago, and he's a pretty bright guy. He does see a lot further than I do in many cases. And he said, you know, games want to be free. And I always hated the way that something wants something, an inanimate object wants something. But I think it really speaks to the point, which is the reason they want to be free is not because people don't want to pay. Certainly that's somewhat true. But really it's more about that immediate access. I can use it anywhere I want. I can try it out. Could you imagine if you were going, and again, going back to entertainment, if you were going to go read an article on the Wall Street Journal online, and they said, we have this fantastic article, and it's about this subject matter, and you're going to love it, but we can't tell you what it is until you pay us. Yeah, it's not going to work real well, right? And in fact, that is what we have been doing for many, we've been getting away with it, but we won't for long. In the entertainment world, these are things, I know I'm pounding this point home, but it is the reason I changed from doing the big games for Electronic Arts and things like that and got into the social media space, because I do believe that these things, free, social, and competitive, are all going to matter. The last one I think is the most important one right now, because people look at where social media games have been, and just like the music industry, and they go, oh well, you know, that's not really interesting. That's not what we do. Instead of looking where they're going, right? So all forms of electronic or entertainment distribution are going to have critical social elements. And critical social elements, what I mean by that is your new distribution mechanism. So instead of thinking about, well, is it going to be on a disk? Is it going to be on a stick? Is it going to be over the internet? Is it going to be on in the air? Think more about what is going to make your audience find the entertainment that you're building. Because let's face it, if you're on an app store, I don't care which app store, especially Apple's app store, you can't be found unless you have some way for you to get the message out. And people would say marketing, and yes, sort of, but the marketing, the new marketing, is activating social networks. To be able to do that, you need to have companies, and you need to have designs around your infrastructure that have some really important, compelling pieces to them we haven't been able to do in the past, or we haven't done in the past. You have to have real-time metrics. So from a business point of view, and I guess I'm going to take a little bit of a side. I thought I understood this when I left EA to go work for Instant Action IAC. So I said, my God, this company is so much faster than EA was at what we did. And that I thought, okay, this felt like the early days of the games where we used to make a game a month and people were running really fast and all that. Until you go to a company, a Web 2.0 or Web, whatever you want to call the next version of Web company like a Zynga, and just using Zynga as an example because that's the one I've been at, you don't realize how slow everything is until you're there. And you realize how fast they are really moving. And I like to think of it in this sort of the insight that I have is it's the decision-making tree turned upside down, right? It's not on my slide, but it's an important piece that I think is important about this whole real-time metrics and understanding how fast you have to be moving, is that the only way to survive in a space where your consumers can consume every ounce of entertainment you give them almost instantaneously, and they do, crazy fast, is to sort of flip everything upside down where the people in the trenches making the actual products themselves get to make the decisions, like the old days, right? And if you're a big company that's doing a $40, $50 million investment in a game, you can't afford to be wrong. You can't take the guy right out of high school or college and let him make a decision that's important to the product, because you're going to have to spend a lot of money making it, a lot of money packaging it, a lot of money marketing it, and by God, if he made a mistake, by the time you find out you're millions of dollars in, tens of millions of dollars in, you're done, you're toast. So you can't do that. But in this case, you have to let those people do it because you don't have time for that person to ask the smarter guy in the room. So I can promise you that in all of these companies, the one thing that's true is the guy walks in right out of college, first day on the job, he's given a responsibility to make decisions that are six-figure decisions. And if he gets it wrong, he gets to make another one the next day. If he gets it wrong, he gets another one the next day. Pretty soon he gets fired, right? Okay, that happens. But he makes lots of you can make many bad decisions and not get fired right away because it takes a little bit of time for people to figure out their bad decisions. But you fail quickly. And the smart ones succeed. And they succeed a lot faster. And so I implore you, if you're thinking about getting into the next distribution medium now and trying to be there early, you need to think about speed. It has to be much, much faster. Imagine the fastest decision-making process you can. That's still not fast enough. You have to share You have to be able to share things, right? You have to encourage the communication between the consumer and the artists and the creators, and you can't let your infrastructure get in the way. That's a huge thing that's very, very different. I know that, not to pick on EA at all, because I think it's a fabulous company, still a shareholder, and they're doing great things. But I was one of the very few executives that my badge would open the testing department. Because as a gamer, I always used to go in and talk to the testers. I always liked to see what they were doing, and I wanted to know what the consumers were doing. They had a whole division that did that took care of that for you. You can't be that way, right? Not anymore, not in this space. This works fine for their business model. It does not work in a social space where your consumers expect to have access to you. And believe me, once you start treating them as customers instead of gamers, once they start having an ongoing relationship, a financial relationship with you, they demand it. They will not give you their money if you're not going to give them some attention. You have to gate the value. You have to give people a reason to pay. Now, I love this because I'll sit around with a bunch of indie guys and they go, we're going to make a great social game. It's going to be really popular. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be better, bigger, faster, whatever. And we're not going to do those crazy viral things. And we're not going to make people have to pay. They're going to just pay because they love it. No, they won't. Right? They won't. You really do have to gate something. There has to be some reason for them to pay, whether it's to accelerate the experience, get a better experience, express themselves, whatever it is. They can be good things. They should be good things. They shouldn't just be sort of brutally punishing them. That's not good either. They won't give you their money. But you do need to give them a reason. And so as designers and such, I know I'm talking to a business action here, a business group here, but designers especially do need to pay attention. They need to give people the pinch point, as Mark says, which is exactly what has to be there or it won't work. And you have to have continuous content. I talked a little bit about this, the relationship with the consumer. You have to stay in front of it because your most rabid consumers, the ones who are going to, the 5% or 3% that carry the weight of the financial burden of the product, those people want more content. They're always wanting more. So the stunning realization I've had by being inside a company like Zynga is that it's not the same as the way we think about it from the industry that I was just in, only a year or two before, in the sense that the consumer, as the consumer's consuming things, the one thing you have as a value, as a team, is the time to make the next thing. So a lot of people would criticize games, a lot of social games, as having a lot of bugs. But it really is a trade-off, right? The consumers say, well, we really like all the bugs to be fixed. It's like, well, if we fixed all the bugs, we would take all of our time doing that. We would not be able to also create more content, and guess what? You'll vote with your feet. You'll leave, right? So again, there's these subtle differences that become really important in the business. You have to prioritize your opportunity around making sure you hold on to your most valuable consumers. And they will work around problems because their time is better spent consuming the new content. They want to be entertained. And so I think Skaggs famously said to me once, he said, Mark's the one who created Farmville and used to work for Westwood years ago, brilliant guy. And he had said, if you put out a social media game and it feels like you've finished it, you waited too long, right? You just waited too long. You should have gotten it out sooner. And I think that, he wasn't saying that you should put out bad products or buggy products, not at all. You should do your best to make them clean, but you want to get that original idea out as quickly as possible, and you need to test it. The feedback loops that happen in social companies and social distribution networks are, you put it out, well, you hypothesize. You create a big database of information, you look through your databases, you hypothesize, you put something out, and then you immediately test it. If you can't real-time test that result, you may go quickly up, but you'll come quickly back down again, because you have to be able to adapt. So, if you're making games today, I submit to you that this is your problem, right? The full integration. When I say that, I mean make your customers, encourage your customers to share the experience. So that's what I mean by social distribution, and that's why I think it's different. And I believe the games that we've seen so far are pretty much like the camera pointed at the stage. We really haven't figured out what a social game is yet. Maybe Words with Friends, Hanging with Friends, these are games that you could look at and say those are close. But we, as an industry, we don't know how to use this distribution mechanism yet. I submit that even the best in the industry, and I do believe I work for one of the best companies in the industry for this knowledge, is still just in its infancy of understanding the power of the connection between people. And when we start to see, and I can't tell you what exactly it's going to look like, I wish I could, but when we start to see it, we're all going to notice it because companies will just come out of nowhere and do phenomenal things because they've understood how to make this a fully integrated experience, how to get their customers to share the entertainment and what it means to let that customer add value to that communication. Because right now, I think we're more or less are really almost exploiting this wonderful thing that was created through Facebook. But we're not really making full use of it yet. We really haven't figured out how to turn on all the social hooks. And I want to be one of the people who do that, right? I think it's that exciting, and the opportunity is that exciting. I don't know if anybody here actually uses the NPS, right? That's what web companies use, Net Promoter Score. That's what that means. That metric is incredibly important. And now, it's very hard to game, unfortunately. Wish it was easier to game. But it's brutally stubborn, because at the end of the day, it's how does your customer feel about the product that they're doing? And those people would say that, you know, companies like Playdom or Zynga or Playfish, they abuse their customers. It's just not possible. People don't pay money to be abused. Of some maybe very strange people, but not millions of people anyways. And these products and these companies understand something fundamentally that a lot of our industry doesn't quite get yet, which is your customer is your distribution network. It's always been true that a referral is stronger than anything else, but this is a different kind of grokking, as it were. It's a different kind of internalization. And so the ones who are left, the ones who make it through all of this, are going to be the people who understand, I don't care what kind of game you have today. It may go for another X number of years. I do tend to jump ahead a bit. But it may be a few more years before it happens, but at some point, there will be a necessity for social network. Maybe not on the social network or Facebook, but it'll have to have a networking opportunity. So, and I do believe all entertainment has to adapt too, by the way. A New Kings I put on there, but it's definitely true. So let's talk about the actual experience itself, because I think that, you know, I've kind of beat that dead horse enough. But what about the evolution? What about these games? Are we gonna always look the way they have looked? Are they gonna change? And I can tell you for a fact they will, and they already have. If you think you've played a social media game, and you haven't played one in the last like 3 days, you've missed the newest thing. It's happening that fast. Even the game that you used to play a year ago is different. It's different within a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Empires and Allies is a game that we just launched, went to 6 million something DAU almost overnight. And that game, I've been playing it since before it came out. And it was amazing to me how much it changed once it made it into the social space. And what was amazing about it is the reason it changed. The reason it changed was not because the smart guy, designer guy, like myself or others in the past, decided that they would add X feature or Y feature. It's because the team put in 6 features, and the ones the customers responded to got built out and refined and added to. And that keeps it going forward and keeps driving it forward. So it's a very different way of evolving. But that being said, the initial expression itself is a much more complex product than something that was just out a year ago. It's closer to an Advance Wars or a Command and Conquer than you could have done a year ago. Had you put that product out a year ago, the customers, those millions of people, wouldn't understand how to consume that yet. But they do today. And tomorrow, the next product that comes out will be even more rich and complex and deep. But that won't mean that it has a steep learning curve in the beginning. It has to be instantaneous. You have to be able to just jump in, play it right away, and then it'll get complex as it goes along. And Charles was talking about last night. He goes, do you think there's a space in social for storytelling? And absolutely. I mean, yes, we will see. That will happen. I hope we're a company that does it. But it will happen. You will see a social storytelling experience. There's no question in my mind. You will see all the beautiful, gorgeous graphics you see on a Gears of War. You're going to see that in this space. It's going to happen. And it's going to get consumed by the same people that we call customers today. And they will, most of them, will not pay anything for it, but some of them will pay a lot more than we've ever thought we could charge for our entertainment. And new games will be possible because so much more money could be spent developing them. They just won't be built the same way anymore. So I stole this a little bit. I have to always give credit to the original person. I don't know if you guys know Chris Crawford. Maybe not, because it goes way back. But Chris Crawford was talking about the evolution of taste. And he said, you know, when you're a child, you like things that are really sweet and really sour, and you don't really have much subtlety. But then as you get older, you start to refine your tastes, and you start to find these sort of little je ne sais quoi, subtle differences that make things all the more wonderful in the world. Terrible English there. But Chris was absolutely right, and I think that it was one of the very first things I took away from a brilliant person, that expressions become more mature in entertainment. And it's true of every genre. They become more niche, but they become bigger in audiences. And the weird kind of stuff that would have never worked in the past suddenly has mass audiences because the experience, the people who are consuming it, have become more mature in their consumption. So I think we are going to be in the space, and hopefully much sooner than I would have imagined, because of the social media experience, because of the rapid iteration, because products are evolving so much quicker and the tastes are evolving so much quicker, this time it's going to be a lot quicker. You're going to see social media reach and eclipse what's happening in the big premium game space very quickly. And I say very quickly, I mean, you're not going to be waiting years for this, right? I mean, certainly not decades like it took us to get to where we are right now. It may be months. That's how fast. Because there's so many companies and so many bright people in the world working at getting this experience out there. And then there's games, certainly not our game, the Battlestar Galactica game that's out there right now is a brilliant looking product that you just pop on the web and play. Now, there's all sorts of technical problems of why it doesn't make it easy yet, but these are all going to get solved. So I guess that's my final point of all of this is the reason I want to be where the puck is going now is because it's going to get there a lot quicker than it used to. The reason I think it's the most interesting place to be from a business point of view is not just the economic opportunity, although it is amazing. It's also has to do with the creative opportunity to be able to build products that I imagine will be even more sophisticated than we've done in the past because of the unlocking of this network effect. And that's really kind of what I wanted to share with everybody, where I'm going with the company and what I think is the most important piece. So I'm way ahead of schedule, probably because I talk too fast when I'm on stage. I did rehearse this, but I'm on my Q&A side. So I do have time for Q&A, and if you'll indulge me, I'd be happy to throw the ball. Thank you.
That was absolutely incredible talk. Thank you very much for an amazing insight on your world and your history, of course. We are going to be tossing this ball around in a few seconds, but I'd like to know a little bit about Zynga, like how many games do you actually start and how many get culled? At what point do you cull a game, and how do you decide that?
Yeah, you know, I've been asked that a couple of times, like when do you stop? When does a game stop? And the answer is, I don't think anybody knows yet, because the biggest ones are still doing brilliantly well. And in fact, actually, one of the challenges that I have personally, and one of the things I really want to accomplish, is to take this sort of, you can look at the curve of most social network games, they're kind of the it thing, there's the sort of excitement and fashion, and then they drop off. Well, those that make it continue. The tail goes out very, very long time, and in fact, we don't know when they stop because I don't think any of them really have stopped yet. The audience has shrunk to some extent. It certainly doesn't have as many people, but I actually want to be one of the people that turns around and makes them start growing again because of something that's been added to it. And there's nothing, as a creative person, there's nothing fundamentally wrong with that as a concept. There's no reason a game that's been around a long time like Farmville can't reinvent itself and grow. In fact, it does. They do successfully do that occasionally, but I think you actually can turn them all the way around. So I don't think that we ever necessarily call them out. You asked a different question, which was how many do you start? Lots. I mean, there's constant ideas being built and viable prototypes are built within the company. And sometimes they work and most of the time they don't. I mean, you have to be willing to move away. I think Brian's given many talks on Frontierville. The first 2 or 3 games that they built, they actually built a game, tried it, tested it, did a few thousands of people and said, you know, it's not working. Let's do another one. It wasn't until I think it might be the 2nd or 3rd major attempt that got the game they have. Even the guys that just did Empires and Allies, I know they went through multiple prototypes of very different approaches, settling on the one they did, because it felt like the best, the metrics that we could gather from it felt like the best thing. So yes, lots of things are started and killed early. You know, famously from the games business, from EA and others, we might 1 out of 3, 1 out of 4. I mean, it might be 1 out of 20 in the social media space that actually go to being a full launch. So also the reason about failing fast to succeed sooner, that's part of it, is you may think you have something great, but the audience will validate or invalidate.
It seems almost strange that Farmville and other social media games have attracted a very large female audience. The soccer mom, the 40-year-old lady comes home, drops the kids off at school, grabs a coffee, comes back, does a few emails, then sits down to play Farmville. Is it an intentional move to make a game for female audience when, given traditionally games have always been played by the most part by males?
I can't speak to. I wasn't there when they did Farmville, so
yeah, but you must know.
You'd have to ask.
You've got all the metrics.
You'd have to ask. You'd have to ask Mark as to whether it was intentional or not. But it was. Now it's quite. We're quite aware of who the audience is, and of course we do have the metrics, especially if the customers are kind enough to tell us who they are and what their demographics are. I've said this in the past, and I think it's more true now than it ever has been. People used to say, "What's your audience for games?" And at Westwood, we used to do games like Boom Blocks. I did with Stephen that was predominantly aimed at children, but we had a lot of adults and a lot of computer scientists and puzzlers that loved it. If those who haven't played Boom Blocks on the Wii, it's very much like a three-dimensional version of Angry Birds. And so it's put this game out where people were playing with physics. Well, physics, turns out it's really fun for dorks, and it's really fun, period, right? Kids like to break things, as Stephen said. So my feeling is the audience for entertainment online is the intersection of time and money, and it turns out that there is a large section of that community, of that underserved part of that community, of sort of 35-year-old women that have time and money to entertain themselves, and they had not previously been given much to do that with. The stuff that had been served to them was just not interesting. So Farmville turned out a way for them to express themselves, and the classification of that game would be called an Invest Express game, where people invest their time and express themselves.
So, getting back then to the traditional male hardcore gamer, obviously you've been involved with Command & Conquer and Empires and Allies. How far along the sort of difficulty level or sort of commitment level do you think you can move a social game from Empires and Allies to a Command & Conquer? And still retain a large enough audience to monetize, etc.
Sure. No, I think that the game that the core audience will be playing already, even in Empires and Allies, I encourage all my strategy friends out there that say, "Oh, I tried playing it, and you had some farms, and it says resource building, and it just didn't feel like the thing I wanted." Whereas other ones said, "Oh man, I started playing it and I got into it," because it's very simple in its presentation, the kind of rock paper scissors. But the team that built that game is the exact same team that built the Command & Conquer games for so many years. And believe me, it gets very complex. As time goes on, as you start to build more units, you start having lots of these massive, these sort of technology trees that you can build to optimize things. And so you're optimizing to a different thing. It's not really a head-to-head play the same way. And maybe it's not the perfect expression yet, but it's a really, really exciting and fun place to play, and it's a lot more sophisticated than it may seem on the surface. So the answer to the question is every bit as complex, ultimately, but certainly not the first time you look at it.
Okay, one more question before we open up to the floor. We've still got 12 minutes. A lot has been heard about Mark Zuckerberg and Mark Pincus's discussions, shall we say, about the relationship between the platform and the content owners. I'd like to hear your opinion about Facebook credits and the whole thing, how Facebook turned off notification. It was okay for a company like Zynga, who got through the door before notifications came down and stopped that sort of virtual spamming of audiences to grow. There's massive companies within Facebook. They think opportunities to new content creators, will that still be available? Will Facebook change its policies, do you think?
Well, gosh, I couldn't speak for Zuckerberg, obviously, but I can say that it's in Facebook's best interest to create a platform that allows people to connect appropriately or socially. And I think that we talk a lot about what are healthy virals. What's a healthy viral situation versus an unhealthy one? And there's an awful lot of effort being put into making sure that the platform can continue to that games is such a big business for Facebook that continues to work well for them, and that of course the platform not just allows the expression, but also goes both ways, right? So both companies wash each other's hands, but as I would say, the whole industry. Certainly, you can feel from Facebook they respect Zynga's importance to their business, but they also want to make sure that they have lots of other people out there. They don't want to have a single player any more than Zynga would like. We would love it if there were lots of ways to get the games out there, but it just happens to be the best place to do it right now. And so I think it's going to always be a a strange marriage, and very much like the console business, it doesn't feel unusual to me that there's a little bit of tension at times, because it's the same as, you know, when you're an independent game company like an EA or an Eidos that's making something for Sony or for Xbox. You know, it's there's the same kind of tension, because boy, they need your content, but at the same time you need their platform. We need the network to activate these social games experiences, and of course the network needs something for you to do. And I think Pincus is famous for having said his whole idea was here's this big social space where you get a lot of people together, and it's not like a bar or something where you can have a cocktail. Let's start a conversation. What are you going to do when you're there? How do you make those people do something? And the games was his idea of what to do while you're sitting in those social spaces. And frankly, you see that with you know, even with words with friends and things like that. It's something to do with your device while you're sitting on the tube. And to me, they have to live together. That's they're you know, they're one and the same. You were asking about the credits and stuff. I don't know that I have a strong opinion one way or the other. I think it added a lot, and it of course put a different kind of business challenge. But
yeah, some people think it's a good thing, because it makes it gets rid of another barrier to people's decisions to spend money. Yeah,
I think it was a reasonable thing for them to do as a platform, and you know, it was a pretty big tithe, to say the least. But it's a good opportunity too, and it did lower the barrier. And I think as an industry, it certainly made it easier for some people. You don't have to do a whole payment system anymore. You can let them take care of that, and that's you know, that's a really wicked bit of tech to get right. It's very easily exploited. So having the platform supply that makes a lot of sense. Very similar to the XBLA stuff, I would say. You know, when Xbox went out and created that, Microsoft created that whole experience. That was a lot of matchmaking and things that you just don't have to do in commerce. So there's real value to it.
Okay. And do you think the hackers will come after Zynga's?
Hackers will be hackers, right? I mean, they're going to hack.
Okay.
I think I do want to say one thing about hacking, though. This is kind of interesting, because I think premium games worry a lot about hackers, because the value to distribute the game to the hacker is there. So one of the things I was really championing when I was with Instant Action was the way you beat piracy is to make the access free at the same time you make the copying hard. You don't make it really easy to copy the products, or to be like, you'd certainly want to prevent people from putting up their own Farmville servers. That would be disastrous. So you make that pretty hard. You protect your code and you do that. But also you turn around and give the experience away, so that there's very little value for the consumer to go out and take the pirated version. In fact, there's zero value. So if you do both, then I think you beat piracy. I mean, nobody really worries about piracy in the social media space.
I was thinking more about credit card details.
Sure, I know what you were talking about. I was just saying that's another side of the hacking side. I mean, we've been brutalized as an industry because, frankly, and I got to tell you, movies, all entertainment right now. I won't steal entertainment because I live in that space, and you don't want to do that. But I got to tell you, they give a better experience. It's painful to acknowledge that from a film point of view, the pirate sites that give away films are better at distributing film than the film industry online. And that's a sad thing. And that's why it's pirated so badly, right? If it was easier, cheap, free and easy, people wouldn't bother. So.
Okay, who wants to be the recipient of the first toss of this wonderful ball? Simon. Okay, you ready?
Oh, right on. Hello. Oh.
Is this working?
I don't know. I don't know. No, it was working earlier.
It was working earlier.
Let's try a different ball. There you go. How about that one?
I've broken my balls.
Oh, there you go.
Leading on from your XBLA point that you mentioned a couple of minutes ago, where do you see the traditional console manufacturers such as Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo going when everyone else is doing freemium, but they don't seem to be?
Well, again, I hate speaking for, we should have those speakers up here to tell you, but I think that each of those companies has a unique opportunity of their own platform. Yeah. They have an audience, and it serves them from a business point of view right now to restrict the things they can and charge the way they do. I personally believe, and it's just a personal belief, that if they were to adopt a freemium model, they would be massively successful, and they wouldn't. But it's a huge leap of faith, if you think about it. So I think that they can make their money doing what they're doing. There's the Call of Duties out there selling at $70, and I don't know what they sell for here, but there's no reason yet for them to take that leap of faith. It pains me in a way because I know, or I don't know, but I feel strongly that if they did, it would change the dynamics of the industry. And I mean, I think they'd sell tons of boxes, and I think the audiences would be massive. They have the opportunity. The XBLA side has the opportunity to do massive free-to-play games, and it's sort of people sort of very lightly test on it, but you have to change the actual product offering, and so there's a kind of a danger there. So again, not speaking for them, but I think it's a huge opportunity, and I think at some point that hardware that sits inside a box right now that you buy separately will be embedded in devices, and so they'll be a little less concerned about people stealing things. They'll be more concerned about how do I get as many people to consume the content as possible and pay for it. Hey, all right.
Right, who's next? Oh my God.
Okay, I'll let you do that one.
Okay, here we go. Are you ready?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I'm Ben from Xbox. So a couple of the reasons, you talk about freemium games on our platforms. I mean, there's a couple of things, a couple of potential impediments, and I'd interested in your thoughts about this. One is, as soon as you start giving away some games, it makes anything we charge for look really, really, really expensive. We have a business model that's been successful for a long time based on royalties for premium games. I can understand why that's a concern for us. Second thing, something that Zynga has commented on, I think recently, I seem to remember a news story about how big Xbox Live as a social network, if you want to call it that, is compared to the size of Facebook, and whether, you know, we have like 30 million or something members of Xbox Live. That's a fraction of the size of the Facebook social network, and whether that's big enough to support the kind of you know, as a distribution mechanism as you describe.
Okay, so I'm going to try make sure. I hope I get this right. So the comment is, could something like an XBLA, because it's a smaller network, be as effective as something like Facebook, which is this massive network? So, so my observation, again, I mean, we don't know until we try, I suppose, but my observation would be that what creates the lift in a social game, looking at the numbers themselves, is when the active social network starts to connect. So it's not an accident that a game like Cityville goes to 20 million DAU, because there's a strange phenomena that occurs when you start to connect the actual network itself. And it's almost, if you imagine it like three-dimensional space, like neurons. The act of the entertainment offering of the social side of it only happens if your friends are playing the game with you. Well, in a big social network like the biggest social network, like the 700-something million people on Facebook, it takes an awful lot of millions of people to have a chance of having somebody you know also be experiencing that product. And that creates the neural connections, and then they expand naturally. My instinct tells me, and I don't have the numbers so I couldn't prove it, but my instinct tells me that something like XBLA could accomplish the same thing with far fewer people, because there's a like-mindedness of that audience. So you've already self-selected out the people that go onto Facebook just to keep track of their travel photos. They have no interest in games whatsoever. So those people aren't part of XBLA. So the people who are in XBLA are already interested in games, and they probably already are gamers. So I would bet, personally, that if you turned on that network the same way you turn on the big social networks, it would take far fewer people to get the network effect.
Hi, sorry, can I just, is this working?
Yes.
I don't want you to divulge any business intelligence, but I am curious about what progressions you typically see in the proportion of people who spend money in your games as they go through this life cycle. They have the big hump and the long tail. Do you see more people, do you see that ratio of people who pay increasing over time as the hardcore stick around, or is it the free players who tend to stick around?
You know, the percentages, I couldn't even give an answer to that question as far as exact percentages, because they're different depending on the product. Whoa. That sounded much worse than it was, I'm sure. So the answer is a very small number of people, and without saying anything about Zynga games, back when we were doing the instant action stuff, you know, we were planning on somewhere between 1% and 5%, and if you look at general industry statistics, that's about where you're going to be. The thing about social network experiences or social gaming is the acquisition cost for the customer. You hear a lot of people talk about the funnel. How much does it cost to get somebody in the door? How much do you have to actually pay to serve that person? And then you have to figure out how much you're going to make for the few people and what the percentages are. So it really is a numbers game. So I can say that as time goes on, in the beginning, you want, again, to connect that network. You have to be able to connect people. But as time goes on, the value of advertising or trying to hit the broad spectrum, the shotgun effect, becomes less and less valuable. In the beginning, it makes a lot of sense to advertise because you got to get the word out there. But then in time, what's really your advertising is your network. That's what's driving everything. And so your marketing is no longer marketing through an advertising network or even cross-game marketing. It actually is marketing feature by feature to your existing consumers and engaging those consumers and making sure they're excited. And a very important statistic in any of these games, and this isn't really a metrics talk. I'm doing one later in the year. It's GDC about that because it's more design. But one of those very important network metrics you want to know is activations, reactivations, and converting somebody to a payer. I think what's maybe counterintuitive is once somebody pays, they become a payer, and people go, well, you count them as a payer even if they paid $5? It's like, yeah, but so few do that. Once somebody pays for something, you've got them in the sense that they were willing to turn over hard-earned money for that experience. All the numbers show you that that person then will pay again and again and again. And if they stop, that's a really important metric to be watching, because if they stop, then you've stopped giving them the entertainment they want. Either they ran out of content or you're no longer appealing to them. And that, honestly, is, we're all learning. If the game is broken, it's because we broke it. If it's working, it's because we figured out what works. And it's a really important point to be constantly watching that. And I didn't hit this home very hard there, but there's a line that you can draw with all of these metrics of profitability. If you were to scatter graph games across the spectrum of just a line that says, okay, these are games are profitable, non-profitable, there are very, very few that are close to the line. It's a negative magnetism, if you will. It pushes in both directions. Games either work and they make money really, really well, or they don't, and they fail fast. So if people that would tell you as business people, we're going to get the audience and then we're going to figure out how to make money, don't believe that for a heartbeat. It doesn't work that way at all. It's extremely difficult to take something that has a large audience and doesn't make money and turn it into something that's making money. And although it's technically challenging to scale something, if it's making money in small groups, it typically can make more once it gets into larger groups. So I would say that there's a divergence. If you were to draw that line on a graph, the divergence goes like this, where the bigger the audience, the more money that you're going to be making, and the bigger the audience, if you were losing money, you're going to lose even more. But you're not going to make more. It's very, very difficult to convert a game over. In fact, I don't think it's ever been done. I certainly don't have all the stats, but when you see somebody out there advertising like crazy to try to drive DAU just to have their MAU and DAU go up, generally it's because they're trying to sell. And if it's not making money, it's not going to work.
Okay, I think we've got time for one more question. Oh no, long ball. Here we go. Okay, you ready for this one?
All right. Well done. I think the... Yeah.
It's my fastball, always does that.
Broke his balls again. So you talked about piracy and the fact that the I know the pirates are better at it than the movie industry at the moment. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why Spotify is doing pretty well. Because they've, sure. I think by design, they built a business that was to not compete necessarily with the music industry, but was to compete with the pirates. Which is a decent...
It's a great point. I'm going to use that.
It's Daniel X, it's not mine. So I think it's a wonderful insight that you provided for other businesses. And I was wondering if you could kind of extrapolate out from the gaming industry any further to provide insight to general marketeers on what they should be taking away from the speed, the pace, the intelligence of your industry into theirs.
Yeah, so I guess the place where, as an industry, you can beat the pirates, as it were, there's always going to be some crazy genius programmer out there that just wants to pirate stuff, and they're going to do it, right? They're going to break it. I don't care how fantastic your systems are, everything's breakable or hackable at some level. But where you can actually, quote, beat them is on the analytics side, because you're offering a legitimate product and people are sharing presumably information with you and you have the analytics. If you have a good analytics system, you can constantly refine your systems to do a better and better job. And so I would say that if you're going to invest heavily in the space as a marketeer or marketing in the digital media space of all digital media, invest in your platform, of course. Make sure it's scalable. You don't want to overinvest in like making something that's going to work for millions of people. Put all that money into it and then not have them come, right? You'll go broke fast. And most importantly is to have those analytics, the metrics, the real-time metrics, and be able to adapt to them in real time. Because then you can actually defeat the piracy, as it were, because you can continually give people what they're looking for. You can see what they're doing. You don't have to guess. But I do believe the first place to start is to say, if there's piracy in your industry, the reason there's piracy is something's broken about the offering, right? These people don't have the kind of resources the companies do, so with far fewer resources, they're capturing your audience. You need to look at that and say, okay, what is it they're giving people that is different? And it's not free. That's not actually what it is. It's actually more complex than that. It's an experience. You know, is it easier? People don't generally want to steal things. They would much rather just be entertained. And they don't go to a pirate site to get movies. They go to those big movie sites, and then they can't get them there. And because they can't get them there, then they go find them someplace else. So it really is more of how do you legitimize the offering that you have, and how do you make money out of the smaller percentage of people that aren't going to necessarily mind paying you? That's the challenge. I don't have an answer for film and television. I wish I did. But for games, I think we've got the answer sitting in front of us. There's lots of examples for it. So maybe we're lucky in that sense that we have an ongoing, interactive, compelling experience, and we can put that content out for people. It comes down to the analytics and the experience. If you give them a better experience, they'll pay. Okay, I think that's it. That was an amazing presentation from you, Lewis. Working for an amazing company in Zynga. They've done extraordinary things, and they're to be congratulated, and so is Lewis. So, big hand of applause for Lewis Cassos, please.